Chapter 24. Accidents happen. It had been a few days and I hadn't heard from Luke. In the meantime, I still had to keep up with my other client, old Mrs. Rosa. When I arrived at her bungalow for our scheduled session, she opened the door, stroking her orange tabby cat. "Come in, honey," she said. We started our warm-up in old Mrs. Rosa's living room, covered in outdated green shag carpet. Not only had old Mrs. Rosa been making progress with the weights, her balance and posture were improving, important keys to old lady health. Thanks to the exercise and stretching regimen, old Mrs. Rosa said she could now open a can of pickles on her own. "How's Oscar?" I asked. "He's good. He's busy. Tax season," she said, nodding. According to old Mrs. Rosa, it was always tax season. I suspected it was something her son, Oscar, told her as an excuse for why he didn't visit as often as she wanted him to. "And the poodle?" I asked. "Don't get me started on that, honey. That no-good wife of his put the poodle in daycare. As if she's so busy she can't take care of a poodle. I have 2 cats and I manage just fine." She put the cat she was holding down, and it ran towards its scratching post. I nodded as we picked up our dumbbells, 5 pounds in each hand for old Mrs. Rosa, 15 pounds for me. "How's Luke Mulligan?" old Mrs. Rosa asked, giving me a sly smile. "Good." I paused for a moment. "I think." "What's wrong?" "Haven't shagged him yet." The only thing shagging was old Mrs. Rosa's carpet, I thought as we marched in place. No, I considered it best not to reveal too much in case old Mrs. Rosa was the leak, but it felt good to talk about Luke with someone who wasn't involved. "I don't know. We get along great. Besides being ridiculously good-looking, he's a really down-to-earth guy. And it's so cute when he tries to sing." "So what's the problem?" We started dipping our legs in mini-squats. One part of me thinks he's too wrapped up in Hollywood and his image. The other part understands what he's trying to do to make good movies that people want to see. My Oscar always says there's more to the equation. I usually don't understand her son's accounting jokes, but this time I think I got it. Yes, there are too many people in the equation. He has a red carpet event coming up, and I think he's taking a leggy starlet. You'd be such a better date. She winked at me. I wondered how many people knew about old Mrs. Rosa's penchant for mentioning sex. I liked her spunk. As we moved into some bodyweight exercises like glute bridges and planks, we heard a knock at the front door. Before old Mrs. Rosa could answer it, another gray-haired woman poked her head in the door. "Yo, oh, Rosa?" When she saw us working out in the living room, she barged in. "There's been an accident. A famous actress has been hurt." "Who?" old Mrs. Rosa asked. "I don't know her, but her face is all over the TV. I was just watching my program and the celebrity news." "What does it have to do with me, Doris?" old Mrs. Rosa asked, lifting her butt off the carpet in a bridge position. "You mentioned your trainer," she nodded at me, "and Luke Mulligan. They mentioned some connection with him." "Luke?" I asked. "Is he hurt?" I couldn't stand to think about Luke being injured. "He's fine. The news was just saying they'd been seen together recently or something." "Or something," I murmured under my breath. While the incident proved old Mrs. Rosa was a gossip, I didn't have time to deal with her indiscretion. I needed to find out what happened, and Doris was not exactly the most reliable source. "I'm sorry," I said to old Mrs. Rosa. "I have to go." I rushed out, not even sure where I planned to go. In the car, I checked out the news on my phone. There wasn't a lot of information as a lot was still unknown, but it seemed Gina had been involved in a car accident on one of LA's freeways. Instinctually, I headed to Luke's. I'm not sure why I thought he'd want to see me after I badgered him about his philanthropy and questions regarding his image. At the same time, I felt guilty about wishing something bad would happen to Gina. I hadn't meant it to actually happen. Even if it meant entering the lion's den, I thought by going to Luke's I could somehow make amends with my conscience and hopefully with Luke. I rang the doorbell and waited. Being such a big house, it could take minutes for someone to get to the door. I almost turned around, having second thoughts that it might be a bad idea to just show up on Luke's doorstep when someone he was close with just suffered an accident. Before I could completely retreat, Luke opened the door, squinting in the bright afternoon sun. "Stella." I turned around and came back to the door, still unaware of what I planned to say next. Turns out I didn't need a plan. Luke grabbed me and hugged me like I was a life raft. He held on for a solid minute before letting me go and pulling me inside. We walked to the living room. "You heard about Gina?" he said as he sat next to me on his plush gray sofa. "Yes, well, I heard she was in an accident. Not much else. Have you heard anything?" "Not much. Katie is working on getting some more information. Sometimes it's good to have someone who's pushy on it, so we can get some answers. I'm sorry, I said. I hope Gina's okay. And if you need me for anything, I'm here. Katie emerged from the office by the entryway and clacked into the living room. Her face looked pouty and stern. It was hard to tell if she had bad news or her expression was due to her rigid demeanor. Good news, she said, barely cracking a smile. Gina's pretty much okay. Suffered some scrapes and bruises. Hurt her leg pretty badly but nothing life-threatening. And the car's totaled. Luke looked relieved. Reach out to her people, please. See if there's anything we can do for her. Katie nodded. Flowers. I'll send them myself, he said. You might think that it would seem weird helping a man pick out flowers on the internet to send to another woman in the hospital, but somehow I enjoyed being able to help Luke. We sat on the couch with the computer between us, looking at different kinds of sprays. Naturally, I steered him away from sending a big bouquet of red roses, which to me spells out love, and instead suggested a large spray of vibrantly colored blooms for a more cheerful effect. While I still didn't know where I stood with him or even the exact status of his relationship with Gina, it was clear he cared about her. And he appreciated my help. Thanks for coming, Luke said. I needed a friend. That time I didn't even read into his words. If I was in the friend zone, so be it. I needed a break from scheming about how to hook up with Luke, and just enjoy being with him. I sat back and relaxed on the couch. Luke challenged me to a game of football on his PlayStation, claiming it would help him take his mind off the accident. I'm pretty sure he thought he'd beat me easily, but what he didn't know was that Daniel and I used to play a lot of video games in our adolescence. You're pretty good at this, Luke said, turning the controller in his hand, willing his player to turn to the left. I used to play with Daniel, I said as my team blocked his field goal attempt, not taking my eyes off the screen. Luke still managed to eke out a victory but not easily. Before we could start the next game, I insisted on an immediate rematch. The doorbell rang. Luke hopped up to answer it, probably expecting someone with some news about Gina. Being that Gina was laid up in the hospital, I didn't think there was a visitor who could have ruined the easy and comfortable bond Luke and I created that day. I was wrong. Chapter 25. Dressed to impress. Breaking up our chill vibe, Lyle bustled in, clearly agitated, holding up a few large garment bags. He wore crisp dark jeans and a bright pink polo with a navy sport jacket. Luke ushered him into the living room where Lyle draped the bags on a chaise lounge near the corner. I'm so sorry. I heard. He put one hand on his hip and hung his head in a pose meant to show his sorrow. Then he walked over to Luke and lightly patted him on both shoulders, a pitiful hug. Katie said she should be okay. Injured her leg, some scratches. We're waiting for more information. I know. He scampered around to the garment bags and unzipped the top one. What are we going to do? Lyle asked Luke. I told Katie to reach out to her people and see. No. About the red carpet. It's tomorrow, Luke, Lyle said, exasperated. That's not important now, Lyle. We'll figure it out. I can just go alone. Oh no. Lyle shook his head. No, darling, no. His face now looked disgusted. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought Lyle was the actor in the room. I'm glad you're here. For once you did something right. He nodded his head in my direction. When our captain needs something, it's all hands on deck. I saluted him in mock agreement. I said. Luke held back a giggle. When I heard the news, I gathered all the gowns I could find from other stylists, designers. Since we don't know who you're taking, I grabbed a bunch of different sizes. Lyle started pulling various beaded and sheer gowns in jewel tones from the bag. Lyle, calm down. This isn't helping Gina. There are more important things than what somehow wears on the red carpet, Luke said. Lyle looked aghast. He held his hand to his chest as if someone just shot him. During his melodramatic performance, Luke rolled his eyes. I see how it is, Lyle said in a sneer. He shoved the dresses back in the bag and slung the bags over his shoulder, making a move to leave. I can see where I'm not wanted. Some people just deal with grief differently, he said. Luke sighed. Lyle, stay. I'm just trying to help you, darling, Lyle said. We can't do anything for Gina right now. Luke nodded, trying to placate Lyle. And please don't say fashion doesn't matter. Lyle raised his chin up a little, showing more confidence. Just because I ran over here wearing rags, doesn't mean I've forgotten fashion. I looked at his outfit, not as formal or even as flamboyant as his usual, but still fitted, ironed, and sophisticated. What can I help you with? I asked to take the attention away from Luke. Lyle draped the bags again on the chaise. He pulled out a gorgeous shimmering bright blue dress and held it out. Try this on. I want to see how it looks. Me. I looked around in surprise. I know Lyle said I needed new clothes. I didn't think this is what he meant. Yes. I need to see it on a female body, he said. I reluctantly walked over to Lyle, grabbed the dress, and headed to the one of many bathrooms in the hallway. Since I had been training old Mrs. Rosa before heading over to Luke's, I wasn't even wearing the proper undergarments. I knew my ample chest wouldn't look right in a gown if I were wearing a sports bra. I took it off along with my workout pants and socks and slipped on the dress. I was surprised to see the color complemented my hair and complexion with its vibrancy. It was a little tight, and although I could manage it over my ample hips, I couldn't zip it all the way. Otherwise, it actually looked pretty good on me. I sucked in my stomach and glided down the hall to Luke and Lyle, who were sitting on the couch. Luke's face lit up when he saw me. Lyle skittered over and I indicated the zipper. He pulled and tugged. I sucked in my breath harder, hoping he wouldn't pinch my skin. He gave one more hard yank and the zipper closed. I must say, looking pretty good, darling. Lyle nodded in approval. I spun around and posed with my hand on my hip like I'd seen so many stars do in the tabloids. She looks great, Luke said. You really clean up well, Stella. He continued to look me over, pausing at each and every curve. I felt a little uneasy about the scrutiny, but flattered at their comments. I certainly didn't feel comfortable in that dress, its tight fabric sucking in my body, but I felt pretty. Luke stood up and bowed like a gentleman and asked for my hand for a dance. We assumed a traditional ballroom posture, clasping hands on one side while I placed my other hand on his shoulder. Since neither of us actually knew how to ballroom dance, we pranced around the room, pretending we were at a ball. Luke started humming a waltz and our feet tried to mimic the 3-beat count of the song. When he stopped humming, he placed his arm tightly around my back and attempted to dip me. I swooned toward the ground, Luke looking over me. We locked eyes and his intense gaze gave me shivers. I didn't want to break the spell as he dipped me further. He tried to bend me deeper, our gaze transfixed on each other. It wasn't that my body couldn't bend that way. I'm fairly flexible. The problem was the dress. Rip. A seam on the side of the dress popped. I scrambled to stand up and hold the bodice of the dress. Lyle ran over to investigate the damage. He started pulling at the dress, but I held on tight, not willing to let go and expose what were then my bare breasts under the dress. Oh, this dress is a one-of-a-kind from a special collection. I knew I shouldn't let an ostrich try it on when it's meant for a swan, Lyle said. I turned on Lyle, pushing him away with my elbow, still holding the dress up to my bosom. I was embarrassed enough and tired of Lyle's backhanded comments. I'm no ostrich, I said. You asked me to try it on. Maybe it's poor workmanship that made the dress rip. Luke stepped over and wrapped me in a cashmere throw that had been resting on the couch. Here. You looked gorgeous. You look gorgeous. He shook his head, not sure what to say. Just go change. I'll deal with Lyle. I'll never know what Luke said to him, although I'm sure whatever it was didn't make Lyle happy. I stood up to Lyle and didn't just run away. Back in my workout gear, I felt more like myself. Even though I enjoyed the fairy tale fantasy Luke and I enacted, it predictably ended in disaster. With details about Gina still unknown and Luke seemingly in better spirits, I decided to head home. I tried to tell myself I didn't care who Luke took to the red carpet event the following night. If Lyle had it his way, Luke would probably take a toothpick. Little did I know, Luke had already made his Chapter 26. Red Carpet Readiness. The next morning I planned to take it easy. I didn't have much planned. Sitting in a t-shirt and pajama pants, I sat down to watch TV. Michelle had already headed out to go shopping. When I heard the buzzer for our apartment, I thought it was strange. I wasn't expecting anyone. When the buzzer rang again and then a third time, I walked to the intercom to check. Who is it? I asked. It's Luke. I pressed the button to open the door to our apartment building. A dozen questions circled through my head. Why was Luke here? How did he know where I lived? Should I change? He came into the apartment holding a garment bag and looking a little disheveled, his hair flopping over to one side. Hi, I said. What are you doing here? Stella. I'm sorry about what happened yesterday. It was a lot with the accident and then the dress. I nodded. After I saw you in that dress looking so gorgeous and sexy, I just thought, well, will you be my date for the red carpet tonight? I looked at Luke stunned. First, Luke called me sexy. Next, he wanted to take me on a date in public. Third, what was in the bag? What would Lyle say? I asked. Don't worry about Lyle. He actually helped me. Luke unzipped the garment bag and pulled out an exquisite purple gown, gathered in the center with a seashell shape in the middle. It's beautiful, I said. The dress slightly glittered in the sunlight streaming through my apartment windows, and the way a shell pattern accented the dress in the front was just my style. Lyle and I worked on it until late last night. He adjusted some things and attached the seashell. I love it, I said. But I don't know if I can be your date. Luke looked worried. I won't attract attention like Gina. I'm sure you can find some other model or actress. I turned away, leaving Luke standing by the door. Luke followed me, draping the dress over a chair. I don't want any other model or actress. He walked over to me and took my hands in his. I want to go with you, Stella. His alluring eyes gazed into mine, looking passionate and sincere. I couldn't look away, as if he'd cast a spell over me, willing me to believe he only had eyes for me. Luke's thumbs gently rubbing the back of my hand stirred my feelings. I looked at our hands, and when I brought my head back up to return his gaze, he kissed me passionately, our heads slightly turned. He let go of my hands and wrapped his arms around my waist. Unlike the last kiss that felt comfortable and soft, this one felt fiery. Our lips opened, Luke's tongue gently dancing in my mouth. When we pulled apart, I again searched his eyes. He stared into mine, and I felt the electricity between us. We kissed again, this time with Luke running his hands along my back. I tried to echo his intensity and ran my hands through his hair and along his neck. He grabbed my shirt and started to pull it off. At first I wondered if he wanted me to try on the dress, but then he yanked off his own shirt and pressed his body to mine. Our skin felt warm against each other as the heat between us intensified. He picked me up easily with his rippling muscles and carried me to the room I pointed out as my bedroom. While I was surprised at Luke's energy and passion for me, I didn't want it to stop. We undressed in between kisses and lay intertwined on the bed. We continued to kiss, Luke cupping my breasts, exploring my skin and curves. Our lovemaking was both passionate and gentle. Luke eased into me and our bodies moved together like our dance the night before. As his hands continued to caress my body, I held his chest tightly to my own. I didn't even have time to worry about what Luke thought of me naked. His lips and his body let me know he thought I was attractive. When he shuddered and rolled over, he let out a sigh, looking over at me. So much for professional, I said. When Michelle arrived home from shopping, Luke was gone. I promised him I'd do my best getting ready with Michelle's help. He said he'd send over a hair and makeup person at Lyle's insistence. I came out in my robe once I heard Michelle open the apartment door. She looked at me and the purple seashell dress draped over the chair. What's going on? Luke asked me to go to the red carpet with him. I smiled and clapped my hands in excitement. Oh, and we slept together. Time out. What? Yeah, he came over with this dress. I stroked the flowing fabric with my hand. Just for me, and well, one thing led to another. Michelle made a confused face. Definitely another. Will you help me get ready? I asked. Sure, Michelle said. Munching on a rice cake, I sat on a chair in the bathroom, Michelle doing my hair. The makeup artist Luke and Lyle sent over was setting up her kit on the counter. What's with the styrofoam snack? Asked Michelle. I busted through one of Lyle's designer dresses, I said, as if that was a perfectly reasonable explanation. Can't take that chance tonight. Huh, said Michelle. I tried on this dress because Lyle asked me to, and it split. It was so embarrassing. I had been dancing with Luke and... Seems like you've been through a lot in the past 2 days. How's Gina, by the way? I don't know. I forgot to ask Luke. Yeah, you two were a little busy. She smirked. And there's been nothing on the news, I said. When the girls were done with my hair, makeup, and nails, I slipped on the dress. To my surprise, it fit well. Unlike the night before, the fabric flowed around my hips and thighs. There was one part Michelle helped pin, in part because I was worried it wouldn't hold up all night. I have to make sure nothing rips or falls off. I'd be mortified, I said. I was starting to feel nervous about people looking at me and taking pictures. People have wardrobe malfunctions all the time these days. It's practically a celebrity requirement, Michelle said. I patted her hand in appreciation. When I gazed in the mirror, I admired how I looked. My hair lay in smooth waves just below my shoulders. The dress hugged me in all the right places, and the makeup artist made my face appear fresh and alluring with a smoky eye and light lip. I had become more confident with my body in Luke's presence, but what would the rest of the world think? I knew cameras would be everywhere, so I stood in front of the mirror practicing standing straight and tall. I hoped I would help represent Luke well, and people would be interested in his movie. I couldn't mess up such a big night for him. And most importantly, now that our relationship had progressed out of the friend zone, I longed for more of Luke's passionate kisses. What I hadn't considered was how I'd react when he introduced me to the rest of the world. Chapter 27. Hectic Hollywood. The flash of multiple camera bulbs blinded me. I wanted to blink but forced my eyes open for the cameras, standing next to Luke, a smile pasted on my face. The red carpet wasn't nearly as fancy as it looks on TV. Instead, there was a long red rug laid out in front of an LA movie theater, which led to a temporary backdrop that looked like a movie screen filled with logos for Luke's next film. Fans screamed at Luke from across the carpet, standing behind silver barricades. Many of them were young women, yet some young men filled out the bystanders. With our arms linked, we walked up to the backdrop for more pictures and television interviews. I prayed I wouldn't trip on the gown and embarrass myself. I gripped Luke's arm tighter. Being that Luke was one of the stars of the film, I felt overwhelmed by all the people looking at me. There were cameramen calling his name, reporters asking questions, and fans screaming, "Luke, I love you." I wanted to run away, not used to so much attention. But I held on to Luke and looked admiringly at him. He looked dapper as his new suit that Lyle finally received and fitted at the last minute. His smile appeared bright and jovial. I could tell he enjoyed the spotlight. Once at the front of the theater by the backdrop, we stopped to pose for some more pictures. I plastered a smile on my face, stood tall, and let go of Luke's arm so photographers could snap pictures of Luke solo. When he rejoined me, a celebrity reporter jumped in front of us with a microphone. "Tell us about the film," the reporter said. "I'm so proud of this performance. It's a departure from my action roles, but I hope people are touched by the story. It was a great script, and I was honored to be a part of bringing the story to life." "Luke, how's Gina?" the reporter asked. Luke tempered his smile a little, putting on a more serious face. "She's doing well. It's unfortunate she couldn't be here tonight. She'll be out of the hospital soon." "And who did you bring instead?" Luke and I hadn't talked about our relationship status. Since picking me up earlier in a town car, we barely got in 2 words between Lyle fidgeting with our hair and call from Katie reminding Luke of his talking points. I didn't know how he would introduce me, especially at such a big event. I also didn't want to apply any pressure on Luke during his big night. This moment was all about him. "This is Stella, my trainer. She's keeping me fit for my next movie." I smiled, hoping he might say more. Being introduced as his trainer sounded so, well, professional. The reporter nodded, barely throwing me a glance, and we headed into the theater. Throughout the event, I felt as if all eyes were on Luke, and I was out of place. He signed autographs and shook hands with some of his fans. Each time he said it, my heart drooped for a minute. Luke talked to some more reporters and other people associated with the movie, introducing me as his trainer. While I wanted to be Luke's girlfriend, I could understand not wanting to publicize such a new relationship to the nosy media. But was he introducing me as his trainer to protect me, or because he didn't want a serious romantic relationship with me? Maybe our tryst was an act of passion on Luke's part, and not the start of us as a couple. As we watched the film, I made sure to clap and laugh at all the right parts. I even gave Luke's hand a little squeeze during a scene where Luke delivered a superbly emotional performance. I was proud of him for taking the risk of starring in a movie that wasn't a guaranteed blockbuster hit. He truly showed he was a versatile actor, able to navigate dramatic content with subtle nuances. I was so proud of him. The day had been exhausting, from my surprise visit from Luke to a bustling Hollywood event. Due to the flurry of preparing for the red carpet, I felt exhausted. I insisted Luke go on to the after-party without me. I just couldn't deal with more stares, more questions, and the aching feeling I didn't belong. "Are you sure?" Luke asked. "I can take you home first." "No, that's okay. You go. Have a good time." I kissed him on the cheek as he was whisked away by another co-star who offered Luke a ride in his limo. My whirlwind date with Luke Mulligan came to an end. I wondered if there'd ever be another. Luke and I had been texting back and forth a few times. Although he never said it explicitly, I was pretty sure he wanted to see more of me. I looked forward to our flirty texts but also tried to keep it casual. Unfortunately, due to his press tour, we couldn't find any time to meet in the last few days. Finally, we set a plan to meet later that afternoon. Before heading to Luke's, I decided to drop in on Daniel at Sunset Fitness. I wanted his advice, and although he was usually the last person I would turn to for romantic tips, this time, I thought he might be able to help. When I came into the gym, Daniel was training a short middle-aged woman with dyed blonde hair. He showed her how to rack the weights and lunge. "Hey Daniel," I said. "I'm busy, Stella," he said, shaking his head toward his client. "I can see that. When you're done." I padded over to his closet office to wait and surf the internet, looking at news and reviews from Luke's film. I noticed some photos from the red carpet event. The verdict? I didn't look half bad. Luke looked amazing, strong and charismatic, just like a movie star should look. By his side, I thought we made a handsome pair. 15 minutes later, Daniel breezed in. "What's up?" He came around to the computer and pushed me out of the seat. He looked at the photos on the screen and nodded his head. Nice, Stella. You look good. That's the way to get some publicity. Luke's looking in good shape too. Thanks, I said. I hope you told everyone who you work for. Sorry it didn't come up. Daniel frowned, unhappy with my answer. I nab a great client like Luke, now you have to keep selling. Try to get me some more Alistairs. Look, I'll try. It's just I don't want to seem like I'm using Luke for business. This is business, he said. Yeah, that's what everyone keeps reminding me. Maybe it shouldn't be. I kind of feel funny taking money from Luke, now that we've slept together. You what? Daniel jumped out of his seat. That's... Daniel started pacing, which in his office meant taking 2 steps, meeting the wall, turning around and taking another 2 steps. That's good. The more people see you together, it will give you a chance to sell Daniel's Sunset Fitness. I made a funny face. That's what you're calling it? Anyway, really, Stella, we could build a brand. He stopped and placed both hands on his desk. Can I talk to Daniel, my cousin, for a second, not Daniel, my boss? I asked. Daniel looked at me, trying to focus on what I had to say instead of becoming the next fitness mogul. What do I do now? I asked. What do you mean? With Luke. I mean, I haven't been with anyone in quite a while. I don't want to seem clingy, but I never slept with a guy unless they were my boyfriend. Oh, that. I'm no virgin, but this is different. I still don't know where I stand with Luke. You do it all the time. How do I act like this is casual? Daniel put his hand on my shoulder. Stella, everyone keeps telling you to be yourself. You don't have to act like it's casual. Well, you do, I said. I was sick of being lectured. I do because I keep choosing the wrong girls. He turned and pointed at me. And I'm always straight with them up front. Sounds like you've got a great guy in Luke. You don't have to be clingy, but you don't have to be casual either. If you're interested in a relationship, go for it. He walked around and gave me a hug. Even though he was my cousin, Daniel often felt more like a brother. When I left Sunset Fitness to head over to Luke's, I resolved to profess my feelings to him. I wasn't going to tell him I loved him and wanted to be with him forever. It was way too soon for that. But I did want him to know that I only sleep with people I can see having a relationship with. I hoped he felt the same. At the door, my stomach felt topsy-turvy as I worried Luke might reject me. Little did I know, professing my feelings would be the least of my concerns. When Luke opened the door, I noticed several designer suitcases sitting near the entryway. Going on a trip? I asked, pointing at the bags. Not exactly, said Luke. I stepped in and jumped up a little to kiss him on the cheek. Instead of appearing happy, he looked a little annoyed. When I walked in further, able to view the living room, I saw the reason why. Chapter 28. Houseguest Headache. Gina lay on the couch, her leg elevated with a pillow. Scratches sprinkled her face and half her nails had broken off. We walked into the living room, and I turned toward Luke, looking for an explanation. Gina needs some help. They just released her from the hospital, and she can't stay alone, so I offered to help her here, he explained. She waved to me from her supine position, her slender fingers wiggling back and forth. Sure, I said, not knowing how to best respond. Do you need anything? Luke asked Gina, a concerned look on his face. Maybe some more juice? She tried to reach for a cup on the coffee table, the straw sticking out from its rim. No problem, said Luke, walking around to the table and heading to the kitchen to get a refill. How are you feeling? I asked now that I was left alone with Gina. Oh, a little bruised. I'm just hoping these scratches don't leave permanent scars. I have a consultation with a plastic surgeon next week. He does noses too if you're interested. I wasn't sure how to take that comment, but I just nodded in return. Is someone going to come to give you physical therapy? I asked, remembering my dad and how hard it was to get the help he needed. Yeah, after the swelling goes down a little. Can you hand me my phone? She didn't seem interested in continuing the conversation. I leaned over and grabbed her phone from the coffee table and handed it to Gina. Luke returned with the juice. Anything else? He asked, looking eager to please. Gina smiled back. You're the best, Luke. Thank you so much. Well, Stella and I are going to head back to do our workout. Text me if you need anything. I'll keep my phone on. Gina looked over at me, a sly smile on her face. Actually, Luke, I don't want to be alone. Can you take me with you? I'd love to watch you sweat. Absolutely, Luke said as he scooped her up in his arms. Is this okay? He asked, carrying her down the hall. I followed behind, annoyed we'd have an audience. Stella, there's an office chair in that room over there. Can you wheel it in here? I found the chair, wheeled it in, and Luke set Gina down carefully in the seat. I grabbed a workout step to prop up her feet. Now that Gina was comfortably situated, Luke and I started with the warm-up. Gina sat in the chair surfing on her phone, barely glancing at us. After my talk with Daniel, I had been looking forward to some time alone with Luke. Even if it was while we were sweating. Actually, getting all hot and heavy would have been preferred. Having Gina in the gym put a damper on things for sure. I suggested doing a HIIT, high-intensity interval workout, in order to work more on Luke's strength and endurance. We started jumping and squatting along with brief periods of rest. Just when we were about to start our third round, out of breath and drenched in sweat, Gina spoke up. "I'm cold. Can you get me a blanket?" she asked. "Sure thing. No problem," Luke said and dashed out of the gym. Left alone with Gina again and not sure what to say, I retied my sneakers, took a drink of my water, and basically tried to avoid making contact. Luke returned and handed Gina the blanket as we continued our next interval. When we finished, Luke and I grabbed our water, our heart rates racing. "Keep walking," I said between sips. "We need to bring our heart rate down slowly." As we circled around the room, Gina sweetly smiled at Luke. Once we cooled down, I suggested some stretches. Luke and I sat on the floor reaching for our toes and stretching our legs. "How's the hamstring?" I asked. "It's a little tight, but otherwise okay," he said. "Let me help you stretch it," I said, standing up to help Luke pull his leg toward him a little further as he lay on his back. I can only guess that during our stretching routine, Gina felt particularly jealous, eyeing us from her perch. "I should stretch too," the doctor said, Gina said as she stood up on one leg and attempted to make a move towards us. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said a little too late. Gina tried to take a step and crumpled to the floor. I'll never know if her pain was sincere or if it was all an act, but Luke sprang into motion like the action hero he portrayed in the movies. He scooped Gina up in his arms and carried her back to the couch. He got her some ice and refilled her juice. He even asked me to take a look at her leg. "I'm not a doctor, you know," I said. "But you were almost a physical therapist." I shrugged, hoping he wouldn't reveal any more details about my past in front of Gina. "That's okay. I'm fine. You're taking such good care of me," Gina said, rubbing her hand along his cheek as he leaned over to fluff the pillow behind her back. "Well, I think it's time I go," I said. Luke walked me to the door. I wanted an explanation. I wanted a reason for why Gina was there. But most of all, I wanted Luke. "I'm sorry, Stella. I need to make sure she's all right," he said, looking back at the couch, worried. "Yeah, I understand," I said, even though I really didn't. "You're close." And I walked out before he could see the tears welling in my eyes. I found Daniel at one of his favorite bars near his apartment. Apparently, he wasn't answering his texts because the battery on his phone was barely holding a charge anymore. When I entered, he was macking on another new girl. A quirky brunette with glasses, a new look for Daniel. I slid next to him in the booth and ordered a beer. I wanted to forget the scene in Luke's gym. Not only was it hard to watch Luke rescue Gina, he couldn't even provide an explanation. When the girl Daniel was interested in went to the bathroom, I took a swig of my beer and said, "What about Sadie?" "Oh, we were never exclusive." "Too bad. She kind of grew on me," I said and took another gulp of beer. "Actually, she ditched me," Daniel admitted. "For some guy with a Tesla." I nodded. "Figures. Well, I may be in the same boat. I just got back from Luke's and guess who was there?" "Who?" "Gina. Looks like she'll be living there for a while." "Ugh." I put my head down on the table. "Well, what did Luke say?" "Nothing." "He said nothing." I rolled my eyes. "Sorry, Stella." I imitated Luke with his deep voice. "That's it." I ordered another beer and started gulping down the drink. "Can you please train him? At least for our next scheduled meeting? I can't face him anymore right now." I shook my head, a pained expression on my face. "I'll make you a deal." "No deals." I cut him off. "No more competitions. This is serious. I'm calling in another favor. Please." I looked across the table at him, trying my best to look needy and pathetic so he'd cave. "Okay, I'll give it a try, but I'm sure he's going to want you back." "I don't know. For some reason, he must think he owes Gina." I finished the second bottle, starting to feel the effects of the alcohol. I looked around. "Looks like your date didn't come back," I said. Daniel nodded, having accepted that fact minutes ago. "And I bought her 2 expensive martinis. Why am I such a sucker?" I laughed. "Maybe we both are," I said. Chapter 29, Tainted Trust. Even though Luke and I didn't get a chance to talk much in person since our red carpet date, I decided I should at least be honest and text him to let him know Daniel would be coming over to train him the next 2 days. I was hoping Luke might insist I come instead, that having Gina at his place was all a mistake. Instead he said he understood because things were a bit complicated, and he promised to explain more in due time. They were complicated all right. I didn't understand why he couldn't give me any answers or at least tell me how he felt about me, and I certainly didn't want to wait for due time. Whatever that meant. The tough part was waiting around, doing nothing and expecting Daniel's report. After the first day, Daniel didn't have much to say, except that Luke asked about me at least 5 times and Gina looked bored, texting on her phone. When I asked for more details, I got radio silence. Sitting at home the following day worrying, pacing the floor a few times, wondering what Luke asked about me, Michelle suggested I give up and just go over to Luke's and face him myself. I decided she was right, and I departed for Luke's to demand some answers. Katie answered the door, and I explained that my cousin was already with Luke, probably in the gym. I didn't see Gina on the couch, but noticed her signature cup and straw on the coffee table. I figured she was probably in the gym with the men. Before I lost my courage, I scurried down the hall to the gym. When I came in the door they all stared, a little surprised to see me. I stopped frozen like a thief who's just been caught, looking at the staring eyes. Daniel and Luke were in between sets, placing their weights on the floor, while Gina sat on her throne like a princess. I'm sorry I'm late. Thanks Daniel for filling in for me, I said, trying to make up some excuse for being there. Sure thing cuz, Daniel said, going along with me. Can I talk to you real quick? I asked Luke. He nodded and walked into the hallway with me. We found our way down to the room next to the pool, Luke looking a little perturbed. I'm sorry, I said. I'm not very good with patience. It's just I need to know one thing. Are you in love with Gina?
No.
Oh Stella. He caressed my cheek. It's not that. Then what is it? I don't understand, I said, searching his face. You know I've been planning to take Gina to the premiere, but it was mostly a business decision. Her manager thought she needed to be seen with a more established star. She's been trying to snag a role in a superhero movie, so being associated with me looked good for her career. And well, you know I wanted the media buzz too, so it worked out. We got to know each other a little bit, but nothing serious. Why didn't you tell me this before? I asked, wanting to believe Luke. It makes me look like such a user, he said. I don't want you to think I just date girls for my image. It's been really tough to find women who are interested in me. For me, and not my fame and money. I nodded, feeling much better. But I still had one more question to ask before I'd let Luke off the hook. And why exactly is she staying here? That day she was in the car accident, I knew she was upset with me. She'd started to become a little too attached. I tried to let her know I didn't feel the same way, and she stormed out. Then she got in the accident. It's not your fault, you know. I put my hand on his shoulder. I know, but I still want to help her. She's otherwise been a pretty good friend. The way Luke smiled, a genuine grin on his face, I knew he was right. He was a big softy in a strong man's body. A very sexy and strong body. I should probably come clean to you about something too, I said. Just as I was about to tell Luke about leaking our trainer/client relationship to old Mrs. Rosa, Katie stormed in. Luke, we have a problem. Katie showed Luke something on her phone screen. Where'd they get this? He asked. I'm pretty sure it could only be one of 2 people, Katie said in her characteristic icy tone. Luke looked at me and nodded. I didn't know what was going on, but Luke asked me to follow him as he and Katie walked back toward the gym. Daniel was there working on his biceps, doing some curls, and Gina continued to sit in the office chair, immersed in her phone. Which one of you sent these photos? Katie asked, holding up her own phone. I still couldn't make out what made her so upset. Gina looked up from her phone while Daniel put down his dumbbell. What are you talking about? Asked Daniel. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, echoed Gina. Personally, I was thoroughly confused too. What photos? You 2 were the only 2 here when Luke was working out in this outfit. Now hand over your phones, Katie said in a demanding voice, clearly living up to the no-nonsense manager Luke liked to have in his corner. Sure. Here. Mine died like 2 hours ago. This battery. I have to get a new one, said Daniel and handed Katie his phone. I smirked, remembering how I couldn't get a hold of him the night before. Yeah, I tried to text him last night. Same thing. No answer, I said. Gina looked around, unsure how to answer the accusation. All eyes were on her. I'm so sorry, Luke, she said, starting to cry, her voice sounding whiny and weak. I think the car accident must have messed with my head. I didn't mean for it to spread so fast. So you sent these yesterday? He asked. She nodded feebly. You kept asking Daniel about Stella and Luke took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and tilted his head back. For a moment, He let his head hang like that before he bore a hollow stare at Gina. The only thing I asked of you was trust. I would have given you anything. I would have helped you. What you did was just dumb. I'm sorry, I swear, she said, looking like a scared little girl after Luke's scolding. But what she got that's so special? I mean, those paparazzi pictures were hideous. I thought they'd make you see she's not good for your image. That was you too? Asked Luke. Gina nodded. You can stay the night, but tomorrow you'll have to make other arrangements. Luke looked very upset, a vein popping out of his neck, but he kept his cool. I had already felt better once Luke told me about his true feelings for Gina, but kicking her out was icing on the cake. I'll go do damage control, Katie said and walked out. I don't think it will be too bad. Lau might be upset. Gina sat in the chair and cried. Luke wheeled her out and offered to push her to her room. I told Luke I'd talk to him later, thinking it best that Daniel and I leave. Luke nodded in agreement. With the night's drama, I still hadn't discovered the truth. Daniel and I left, but not without wondering what exactly was in those pictures Katie uncovered. While one thing was certain, Luke definitely didn't love Gina, but was he into me? Chapter 30 Party Plans. The next time I met up with Luke, we headed to the pool. Since his shooting schedule was coming up for his next film, we needed to hit the water and get Luke swimming. The sun reflected off the pool, causing me to squint as I looked up at Luke. Before he could take off his shirt and distract me with his burly body, I asked him about the pictures Katie uncovered. What were those pictures about anyway? I asked. Luke laughed, able to find the humor in the situation. It was stupid, he said. Sometimes, Katie and Lyle, they both get their panties in a bunch over my image. So, I glanced at him, still looking for an answer. It was a picture of me working out, but my underwear was all bunched up, coming out of my gym shorts. I was still looking for the full answer. That couldn't be it. Underwear hanging out of gym shorts, who cared? Well, he continued, I'm a bachelor, so. Yeah, but a very rich one. Still, for some reason I got behind on my laundry. My housekeeper went on a little trip, and I was wearing some old underwear. I still didn't get it. Who would have realized that? Tidy whities, he said. I laughed, still not believing that was what caused all the stir. But the worst part was, they were from the era when I still did my own laundry, so there was like a brown mark. I cracked up, covering my face with my hands. I burnt them a little in the dryer, I swear, he said, holding up his hands to protest his innocence. You mean Gina sent a picture to people of your skid marks? I laughed. Kind of. She honestly thought it wouldn't blow up like it did. She sent it to a friend, who then sent it to some kind of media hounds for a quick buck. I'm so sorry, Luke. I tried to look sympathetic, but then we both burst out laughing. Luckily, my housekeeper is back. I bought some fresh undies and am ready to go. I'd love to see them sometime, I winked. He smiled back at me. It just proves I have to be careful who I trust if something so mundane as my underwear hanging out can cause a media storm. Lal almost took my head off. He stripped off his t-shirt, his six-pack more visible now due to our training regimen and Luke's commitment to healthy eating. He had been having his chef prepare healthier fare, along with the occasional juice drinks Gina got him hooked on. The work was paying off as I noticed his chiseled features and rounded butt. I figured I should jump in the pool to cool off before Luke noticed how sweaty his sexy body was making me. The next few days Luke and I spent in the pool. Luke's skill was progressing. In addition to being able to perform some legitimate freestyle, we worked on dipping underwater and retrieving rings at the bottom of the pool. Each time Luke mastered a certain depth, we moved deeper. We hadn't reached the deepest part of his pool yet, 10 feet, but I was sure he'd get there in no time. After each session, we'd sit on 2 deck chairs, Luke's arm around my shoulders. I felt warm and cozy under Luke's wing. When I finally found the nerve to bring up our afternoon together, Luke suggested we take it slow. He was still reeling from Gina's betrayal, and even though he swore he trusted me, he recommended we get to know each other a little better before hitting the sheets again. How about I make you dinner? I suggested after another swim session, Luke wiping down his taut body with a towel, looking sizzling hot. I'll cook you my famous lasagna, I said, hoping to entice him with homemade food. No, let's have a party, he said. It's about time I introduce you to some people. We'd pretty much been hanging at his house for the last week. I finally beat him at football on his PlayStation, and I introduced him to one of my favorite romantic comedies. We sat in the theater, popcorn between us, just happy to be in each other's company. There I could be myself and not worry about all the Hollywood hoopla. I wanted to stay in our bubble of domestic comfort, but Luke had other plans. A party? I'm not sure I'm ready to meet your A-list crowd. Nonsense, he said. You did it before. You were great on the red carpet. My movie's doing so well at the box office. We should celebrate. I hesitated, looking into Luke's expectant eyes. He really seemed to want this. How could I resist his deep chocolate eyes gazing at me? Can I bring Michelle? I asked. Sure, he said. And Daniel. Are you sure you want Daniel hitting on any girl with 2 feet? I don't mind. He just might get lucky. That's what I'm afraid of. I broke the news to Michelle, who immediately insisted we go shopping for new outfits. We cruised some stores at the Grove in LA's fashion district. I picked up some sale items, my budget was still on the lean side. And Michelle found a gorgeous cocktail dress that accentuated her lean legs. The night of the party, I shimmied up my underwear and pulled over a pair of faux leather leggings and a bright neon yellow tunic that flowed almost to my ankles in the back. Michelle fitted me with a complimentary belt and necklace. The accessories, along with the pair of strappy black heels I wore the night Daniel had his arm broken by those thugs, added pizzazz to the look. I didn't exactly know what kind of party Luke planned, but we wanted to look our best. I finished the look with a black moto jacket, and we were off to our first celebrity party. Similar to my night on the red carpet, I approached the evening with both feelings of excitement and trepidation. While I knew we'd have fun, I also worried about fitting in with Luke's crowd. That time I wasn't as worried about my outfit. Turns out I should have been. Chapter 31. Game on. Pulling up to Luke's mansion for the party, Michelle let out a slight gasp. Holy moly, she said. The massive house looked festive, lit up from the inside against a shadowy night sky. Once we exited the car, we could hear the noise of music and people bustling toward the back. A valet took my keys and Michelle and I walked to the door. A large, tall man in a goatee with a receiver in his ear stopped us at the door. Name, he said abruptly, not even glancing in our direction. Stella, I said. And this is Michelle. He looked on his clipboard and crossed off our names. Then he opened the door. I originally thought Luke meant he was going to throw a party for some cast and crew. A small affair. Instead, it looked like all of Hollywood was partying on Luke's estate. On the other side of the towering entryway, a dozen tall tables stood as places for guests to hold their food and drinks. A makeshift bar sat to the side of the kitchen and the breakfast bar featured an array of snacks. Waitstaff glided around with trays of hors d'oeuvres, while others fetched drinks for Luke's myriad of guests. Michelle entered the foyer and turned around, taking in the immense size of the place. A waiter offered us a glass of champagne, and we made our entrance. Michelle pointed to a famous Hollywood producer and his wife, having seen them in the gossip rags. In just 5 minutes we recognized 4 movie actors, a famous musician, and a well-known director. With all the Alistairs milling about, no one really noticed us. We tried to blend in and not appear star-struck, but when Michelle came back from the bathroom she jumped up and down and giggled that the lead singer of a famous girl band had just passed her in the hallway. After we struck up a conversation with some of the crew from Luke's last movie, I felt comfortable leaving Michelle to go find him. I stepped outside, seeing a small rock band playing in the yard to the side of the pool. More guests talked and sipped, standing by the pool and other nooks along the manicured lawn. In a few moments, I noticed Luke conversing poolside with another action-adventure star. Walking up next to them, I felt like a troll entering a country of giants. They both towered over me, looking daunting in height and breadth. Stella. Luke looked happy to see me and kissed me on the cheek. This is Will. I know. I nodded and shook his hand. His grasp nearly crushed my bones, his hand strong and beefy. Will smiled and commented on the band. We talked a little about music and then he excused himself and turned to join the rest of the party. Some party, I said, shouting over the music. Luke looked around, smiling. Do you know everyone? I asked. Basically, he said. I want you to meet someone. He grabbed my hand and pulled me along to a group of older men and women huddled by Luke's glowing outdoor fire pit. Even though it was a warm night, the heat provided a sultry glow that illuminated the faces surrounding it. Luke squeezed his way into the circle, still grasping my hand. Hi everyone. This is the trainer I've been telling you about. Again with the trainer bit, I thought. They nodded in my direction, and then the man to my left started asking me about my training techniques. I mentioned Daniel and how much he helped me, how he encouraged me to pursue my training license. We talked a little more about swimming and weightlifting before the crowd started to disperse from the glowing fire. The band took a break and more people filtered outside. The heat from the fire and started to make me sweat, and I took off my jacket. Michelle joined Luke and me by the fire pit along with Daniel, who had swaggered in a few minutes before. Daniel, catching the eye of a tall blonde, asked Luke to introduce him, and they walked over toward the pool. Lal sashayed my way, kissed me on both cheeks and said, "You looked great on the red carpet, darling." He wore a bright blue shirt, black bow tie and black leather pants. Thanks, Lyle, I said, willing to let go of my grudge. That dress was beautiful. I know. One of my better ones. I designed it. He smiled smugly. Oh wow. My mouth fell open. You did a really great job. Luke insisted I add the seashell detail. We make a good team. He turned toward me, a smug look on his face. I'm trying to break into designing, but that was my first design on the red carpet. I nodded. Glad this ostrich could help, I said. He smiled and glided away to another group, calling, Darling, that jacket is just magnificent. Just then Michelle pointed out a guest I wasn't prepared to see. Gina, a cane under her left arm, hobbled onto the pool deck. She looked better, the scratches having healed, able to put a little weight on her foot. A man in his 20s, tall and striking, with the chiseled face of a male model, stood at her side. I wasn't sure why Luke would have invited her, however. He had some explaining to do. When Luke came back to check on me, I asked why he invited Gina, pointing in her direction. He bristled. We had a little chat, he said. She apologized profusely. I think she knows what she did was stupid. I gave him a doubtful look. She begged me to come. Claims she has a new beau anyway. Well, that was fast, I said. I guess that green juice really is magical. Luke shrugged. I looked Gina's way and she caught my eye. I stared at her and grinned. She raised her hand and wiggled her fingers in a lazy wave like she did that day on Luke's couch after she was released from the hospital. Game on, I thought. Chapter 32. Party hardy. When the band started up again, Michelle and I danced, a small crowd forming in front of the makeshift stage. We twirled and bopped to the beat. Luke joined us in between conversations with other celebs and people in the biz. At one point, Luke and I swung our hips together, so close not even a piece of paper could fit between us. I swear Gina leered at us swaying together and threw me the evil eye. Michelle started singing along to the songs, belting out the melody in her strong voice. A music producer gave her his card and told her to call him. She turned to me with her mouth wide open, looking up at the stars, mouthing, "Thank you, God." A large grin formed on her face from ear to ear. I couldn't have been happier for her. After some dancing, Luke again took my hand, and we grabbed another drink before ending up in a discussion with 4 or 5 other guests about the next superhero movie yet to be released. One guy in his 40s, tall with a thick head of dark hair, looked at me and pointed. "You looked great on the red carpet." "Thanks," I said. A petite woman the size of my pinky finger joined the discussion and commented, "Yeah, you rocked it. It's great to see different body types out there." I quickly shoved the puff pastry I'd been nibbling into my mouth and nodded. It tasted like a little cloud of cheesy goodness. I wanted another, but standing next to such stunning stars, I decided to restrain myself. Luke sensed my dismay at the added attention and said, "Stella's gorgeous. I love her strong body." He hugged my waist a little. "Without her, I wouldn't be in such great shape." He indicated his svelte physique. I hoped that would be it until another man jumped in. Personally, I like to see women with a little heft. I don't like the waif look. As I grew more uncomfortable with the conversation veering toward the objectification of women, Gina limped up to the group. "Thank you everyone for the compliments," I said. "Lyle's dress really helped me appear more presentable. And we all know makeup artists are really the secret stars of the show." I laughed nervously. "Ooh, who's this Lyle?" someone asked. I loved the seashell dress. "Let me go find him," I said, desperately wanting to get away from Gina's glaring eye. Outside again I didn't see Lyle, but I did end up running into Katie, whom I almost didn't recognize. Her party outfit was much different than her work attire. She still looked fierce, donning a leather bracelet with spikes and a black choker along with ripped jeans and a tight black t-shirt. The front part of her hair was wrapped into 2 little buns on each side of her head. "Hey, Katie," I said after doing a double take. "Hi, Stella," she said, pausing with a glass in her hand. "Listen, the other night I might have overreacted. I can just get so frazzled making sure all my clients present a good image." "No problem. I understand. Don't post pictures of you and Luke on the internet, okay?" she asked quite sweetly. "It would make my job a hell of a lot easier." "Sure. Will do." "Good, or I'll have to kill you." She looked at me seriously. Then she fake chuckled and walked away. Walking near the deep end of the pool, I found Daniel. "Some party," he said. "I got 2 numbers so far." He pointed to 2 sets of digits on his cast. "For training?" I asked. "Nah, you know," he said, nodding his head smugly. As we both grabbed another drink from a tray passing by, I saw Gina hobbling our way. I looked to my left for an escape route, but a group of people blocked my path. To our right, another cluster congested the path, grabbing hors d'oeuvres from one of the waiters. I stood with Daniel trapped like a hamster in a maze. After a minute or two, Gina finally reached us. "You must feel pretty good," she said, "getting all those compliments about the red carpet." My face started to feel flush, partly due to the alcohol and partly due to the anger I felt over Gina's jealousy. "I'm sorry you didn't get to go. I'm sure you would have looked gorgeous," I said. "Anyone would look striking standing next to Luke," she said. It was supposed to be me. Usually, like in my escapades with Daniel and Michelle, when someone gets in my grill I lash out. Normally, I'd have spilled an hors d'oeuvre down her dress or given her a little hip bump so she'd fall into a crowd of guests. The start of a line of dominoes. That time, however, I didn't quite know how to respond to someone who was physically weak and recovering. I felt sorry for Gina in that moment. I knew what a catch Luke was. How could I blame her? She was supposed to get all the attention. That's what they both had planned. But of course, if there was one thing I learned since I met Luke, it was that things don't always go as planned. "Again, I'm so sorry about your accident and glad you're feeling better," I said. When the waiter departed from the group aside of me, I saw an opening. I guess it was my moment of weakness and sympathy that allowed me to be caught off guard. Or maybe my luck in those strappy black heels ran out that night. I stepped back to turn away and my heel caught on a crack in the pavement. Daniel looked at me, reaching out to grab me with his broken arm as if in slow motion. As I teetered, Gina reached out her cane, and I made a movement to grab it. But she didn't intend to save me from my fall. Instead, she jabbed the cane at me, pushing me back. For the second time in my life, I fell in a pool with my clothes on. But this time I wasn't able to save my. Chapter 33, Wet and Wild. Shocked at Gina's betrayal, I splashed into the water and felt myself sink a little. Once I got my bearings, I quickly assessed that since I was midway in depth, maybe it would be easier to sink a little further to the bottom and push off to propel myself to the top. After all, I could hold my breath pretty well. I sunk down, raising my arms above my head. When my feet reached the pool's floor, I bent my knees and pushed up. However, I didn't realize that my shirt, flowing behind me in the water, got stuck on the pool's drain, slightly raised on the pool floor. I started to struggle, pulling at the shirt, bubbles quickly releasing from my mouth. I yanked again, still unable to untangle myself. It felt like minutes under the water when it had only been seconds, but my panic caused me to expel air at a rapid pace. I looked above me at the surface of the pool, and could only make out a few blurry figures by the side. I tried yelling underwater, waving my arms frantically, hoping someone would realize I was stuck before it was too late. Just as I considered my last resort, unbuttoning my shirt and emerging topless, my fingers fumbled on the buttons. I desperately tried to undo them before I ran out of breath, when I saw a splash from above and a large form dive down and pull my shirt. As the last air bubble escaped my mouth, a little dizzy from the lack of oxygen, I surfaced and realized it was Luke who saved me. By that point, people surrounded the pool and clapped at Luke's heroics. I smiled and he hugged me, asking, "Are you okay?" I nodded, taking in as much air as I could, and he kissed me hard and intense, our bodies starting to submerge underwater. Before we went under, though, he released me, and we swam to the wall where I heaved for air. Everyone cheered. A man in his 30s yelled "Cannonball," and careened into the water in his jeans and button-down shirt. Then a few more men jumped in, followed by a couple girls in their 20s who had speedily stripped down to their underwear. "Pool party," yelled another man, and more people, some clothed, others in underwear. One man in his birthday suit entered the pool. As the pool filled with partygoers, the band started playing songs from the Beach Boys, and people bopped around in the water. I watched as Gina looked on, disgusted. Once her supposed new boyfriend arrived at her side, she took his arm and turned to leave, shuffling back toward the house. Luke dipped and swum, demonstrating his newfound swimming skills. I smiled as people watched Luke show off a little. I was so proud of him for overcoming his fears and learning to swim. And of course for diving down deeper than he ever had to save me. When the party died down and most of the guests had left, I sat by the fire pit, drying off and warming up. Daniel left with a short brunette who worked as a film editor, not usually his type, but I was glad to see him branching out. I told Michelle to head home without me, giving her my valet ticket and telling her I'd get an Uber. She was still reeling about the card she received from the music producer. A couple of other people lounged about, getting dry or too drunk to leave. After making sure his guests had towels and offering up some spare clothes to some of his buddies, Luke ambled over to where I sat by the fire pit. "You know you really have to stop doing that. You have my attention." "Doing what?" I asked. "Falling in pools." I laughed. "I didn't mean to." "I know. I saw what happened." "You did. I was watching you from inside." He looked over at the house, indicating where he'd been. I can't seem to take my eyes off you. He took my hand and pressed it between both of his. Daniel paused, I'm sure thinking like I was that you'd surface, and he wouldn't need to get his cast wet. He laughed a little nervously that time. When you didn't come up after a few seconds, I knew something was wrong. And you sprung into action like the guardian angel you play in your movie, I said. Something like that. He looked into my eyes and slowly brought his face closer to mine. I inched my lips towards his and we kissed under the stars, the fire glimmering aside of us. I couldn't lose you, he whispered, his lips almost grazing my own as he spoke. He kissed me again, our lips opening, our tongues exploring each other's mouths. Let's go inside, he said, leading me by the hand. I still had on my wet clothes, although I draped my dry coat around my shoulders. Luke led me upstairs to an immense room with a huge bed, draped in a blue and gray bedspread. Massive wood furniture filled the room, including an armoire, bureau, and dresser. In the dim light, it was hard to make out all of the ornamental elements, but it was clear the room had been professionally decorated. Besides the size of the room, I knew it had to be Luke's because the musky, woodsy smell permeated the air. It reminded me of our first workout together, completing push-ups just inches from each other, his smell arousing me with each rep. Do you have any clothes I could borrow? I asked. You know, because this isn't the first or even the second time my clothes have landed in the pool. Oh right, Lyle. Luke remembered. But my answer is no. I looked at him confused as he wrapped his arms around my waist. You don't need any clothes. He brought me to him, my wet shirt soaking through the dry t-shirt he had tossed on at the end of the party. He started undoing my belt and then pulled off my shirt. At least that time I wore nicer underwear, my black lace bra rubbing against his chest. We moved to the bed where I pulled off his shirt. We kissed, falling back on the pillows. Still attached at the lips, he unsnapped my bra. I let my hands glide along his broad chest, feeling his firm musculature. He mimicked my movements, rubbing his hands along my breasts and shoulders. I felt so safe with Luke, partly because he had indeed been my hero that night, but also because his touch felt soothing. He pulled off my pants, which wasn't an easy task for faux leather leggings, and slowly lowered his hand into my panties. I caressed his cock, now hard and erect, before grabbing the waistband of his shorts and pulling them off to uncover a pair of black boxer briefs. I see you have on your good underwear, I joked in between kisses. Luke smiled and kissed me harder before grabbing his underwear and pulling them off. Now you see them, now you don't, he said, dropping them beside the bed. I slunk under the covers and removed my own panties, twirled them and threw them with his. We kissed and fondled until I couldn't take the anticipation any longer. Unlike the first time, Luke pushed inside me harder, a hunger fueling him in each movement. Encompassed by Luke, I hugged his shoulders while I squeezed him inside me. Our bodies grinded and pulsated, feeding our appetite for each other. Even after it was over, I didn't want to let go. My body tingled. I held Luke close, relaxing underneath his weight. He rolled onto his side and lightly kissed my shoulder. So much for taking it slow, I said. Chapter 34, Morning Glory. I meant what I said, you know, Luke said as he stroked the hair off my shoulder, lying behind me completely naked. What's that? I asked, rolling to face him, keeping my body covered with his soft gray sheets. I love your strong body. He stroked my bicep and let his finger travel down to my navel. I'd never felt so sexy or confident in my own skin. Besides that, I had been feeling more confident about myself overall lately, teaching Luke how to swim, walking a red carpet, and mingling with Hollywood celebrities. I wondered if I would feel the same way in the morning in the bright light. Would I be comfortable enough to let Luke see my naked body? I snuggled safely against him as we drifted off to sleep and tried not to think too much about the morning, instead focusing on the warmth of Luke's body wrapped around my own like a cozy blanket. As sun burnished through the windows the next day, I opened my eyes, taking a second to realize where I was. In the daylight, Luke's room looked even bigger. I turned to look across the bed for Luke, who was nowhere to be seen. Now was my chance. I crawled across the bed, which seemed like a huge cavern that could swallow me now that Luke wasn't there, to look for my underwear on the other side of the bed. I dipped my head over the bedside but couldn't see them. I tried to hang my body over the bed and look underneath. I still couldn't find them. Just as I was about to slink back under the security of the covers, Luke strode in. Not so fast, he said, caressing and kissing my shoulder, then my breast, all the way down to my stomach as I kneeled on the bed. He wore a pair of boxer briefs and nothing else. Looking for these? He teased, holding up my panties, now dry from sitting out all night after the pool party. I tried to snatch them out of his hand, but he pulled it away too fast. I smirked, becoming irritated. I didn't mind having a little fun, I'd just rather be dressed first. I was already mortified he'd probably seen my entire backside in the daylight as I was hanging over the bed. What more could he want? I hope you know you don't need to hide from me. I don't think like some of those Hollywood people that thinner is always better. I know, I said, lying back. It's just... He traced a line with his finger from my foot all the way up my thigh. I told you about Ryan. Luke nodded. I'm not Ryan. He continued gently stroking my body as I lay fully naked on the bed. No, you're not, I said as I succumbed to Luke's touches and his fingers inside me. I closed my eyes and enjoyed the satisfaction of Luke's strokes and then his mouth on me. When I achieved an orgasm, I opened my eyes to find Luke looking in my eyes. Thank you, I said. He lowered himself next to me on the bed, relaxed. We laid like that for a minute, before I sprung up like a cheetah on a hunt and straddled Luke, grabbed my panties and quickly rolled to the open side of the cavernous bed. Luke tried to grab my ankle as I hopped off and sunk below the other side of the mattress, scrambling to get my feet through the underwear. When I succeeded, I popped up topless but otherwise feeling like I'd one-upped Luke. Sneaky, he said. I like it. Where are my other clothes? I asked. Drying. But you don't need them. I looked at him incredulously. I can't stay here all day naked like some sex slave. He laughed. Now that's an idea. He shook his head, grinning. Just kidding. No, I thought we'd do some more swimming. I really need to be ready for shooting my new film next week. Well, last night you certainly proved yourself. I smirked, then added. In more ways than one. That was the adrenaline, he smiled. On both fronts. But seriously, I just really have to make this movie work. I owe it to Cassidy. At the mention of her name, he became more serious. I was reminded of how much this project meant to him. Okay. Get me some boxer shorts and a t-shirt, I can swim in those. He nodded his approval and searched his drawers, before grabbing his bathing suit. Aren't you at least going to offer me breakfast? I asked. Don't worry, my chef left some delicious breakfast burritos. You just have to heat it up. Sounds good. Luke threw me the clothes and walked out of the bedroom. Of course, after he mentioned his deceased sister, I couldn't ask Luke about our relationship status. It would seem trivial and maybe even a little desperate. He was clearly into me. Whatever he wanted to call that, I had to go along with it. I just hoped he realized I didn't prefer casual sex to a real relationship. As I descended the staircase, I could see the remnants of the party the night before. Empty glasses sat on the tables by the kitchen along with some napkins and leftover food. Luke's other overnight guests must have woken up earlier or been sent home by Luke. Want me to help you clean this up first? I asked Luke as he stood in the kitchen. Luke chuckled. That's not your job, Stella. Of course not, but I can help, I insisted. No, what I mean is, it's someone else's job. Right. I nodded my head. For a few hours I forgot about Luke's status and all the money and fame that went along with it. Taking in the aftermath of the party, I was reminded of the pressure and expectations Luke faced. We better get to work, I thought. Chapter 35. More to the story. Being another warm sunny day in LA, it was perfect for a swim. Cups and trash littered the yard and area around the pool. The bushes appeared battered, leaves and twigs scattered on the ground. I could hear birds chirping as the water looked placid in the afternoon sun. Except for the bushes and debris, it was hard to believe so many people had partied in that pool the night before. We practiced Luke's freestyle and then started to dive for rings, that time at the deepest depth. Luke struggled to get all the way down to the bottom at 10 feet, the depth in which he had actually saved me the night before. Thinking about those moments struggling underwater made me shudder. If it hadn't been for Luke, my hero, I don't know what would have happened. How long would I have had to wait for Daniel to realize something was wrong? I'd have to tease him about it later, I thought. Maybe I could even get him to owe me a favor for once instead of the other way around. I watched Luke carefully as he tried to descend to the bottom head first. I don't understand it. Why can't I do this? He asked. I suggested trying to go down feet first by bringing his arms above his head. Still he struggled. I think we were both aware of the near tragedy that could have occurred the night before at the bottom of the pool, and it caused Luke to hold back a bit. It's all right, I said. You'll get it. We'll just keep practicing. How about we practice treading water? I think you'll have to do that a lot in the movie. No. I want to get this. Luke tried to dive down again, but each time he tried he got more out of breath. In frustration he climbed out of the water. I hopped out too and grabbed our towels, throwing one at Luke. I didn't think this would be so hard. I mean, I'm a fit guy. He made a muscle, his bicep bulging from his arm. He looked strong and formidable. Swimming isn't all about muscle and brute force. It takes a more nuanced approach. He looked disappointed. Think about golf, I said. You don't just whack the ball as hard as you can on an 8-foot putt, right? He shook his head reluctantly. I should have auditioned for a golf movie instead. Snooze fest, I said. No one wants to see you golf. They want to see your sexy body all shimmering with water oozing off your skin, and your muscles defined and chiseled in a skimpy swimsuit. That's what I'm worried about. I don't just want to be the beefcake anymore. I have more to offer than that. He threw the towel down, stood up, and walked toward the house. Luke, wait, I called after him. I didn't mean it like that. Inside, I followed him down the hallway to the kitchen. I was dripping wet in the t-shirt and shorts I borrowed, but I didn't care. He grabbed a muffin from the cupboard and unwrapped it. I swatted it out of his hand before he could put it in his mouth. Now look who's running away, I said. Luke turned toward me, giving me a look that showed he was considering my words. Why'd you take my muffin? He asked. You can have your muffin, but cool off first. I know how this goes. You get mad at something, you eat something you shouldn't. You've worked so hard to get yourself in shape for this movie. Both with your body, I indicated his midsection with my hands, and in the pool. He still wouldn't look at me heeding, but I could tell he was listening. I've just got to get this right, he said. I really owe it to her. Otherwise, I don't know. Why are you putting all this pressure on yourself? I asked. We have a week. You can do this. You don't understand, he said, turning away from me toward the kitchen cabinets. Try me, I said. I know you didn't fully trust me before. I get it. But you can tell me. I can keep your secret. He turned to look at me. It's not that I don't trust you. I was relieved to hear that. I knew Luke kept certain aspects of his life private. He had to. Being a celebrity, people wanted to know everything about him, even the most ordinary details. Besides trying to maintain a good image, Luke deserves some sanity by keeping things confidential. What is it then? I came up behind him and rubbed my hand along his back. He paused for a moment and then turned around to face me. You can tell me, I urged. He kissed the top of my head. When I saw you in that pool last night struggling, it scared me. And it brought up some old feelings. Feelings I tried to forget by going to bed with you. Yeah, you said you were afraid to lose me. That's sweet. I smiled up at him. No, it's something else. I'm afraid if I reveal it, you won't want to be with me. That's silly, I laughed. No. It's something that's taken me a long time to work through. I've been seeing a therapist and everything. Oh, Luke, that's not going to scare me away, I said. Plenty of people see shrinks. Not that, it's about what happened to my sister. I looked at him confused. What was he talking about? They have been so young. Why don't you go change? There are more t-shirts and shorts in the guest room, he said. I nodded and walked away. What could Luke possibly tell me that would make me not want to be with him? I couldn't fathom it. Not only was Luke hot as hell with money to burn, he liked to share it and have a good time. Add to that, he was down to earth and his quirks made him adorably cute. Okay, maybe he had a bit of a problem with balancing his image and his love life, not to mention who to trust and a clear need to act like the hero. But that was all because he was so generous. Apparently he had his hang-ups too. Who doesn't? I couldn't understand what would be so hard to tell me. I hoped he wouldn't push me away. I had to convince him his secret was safe